The Mishnah on Daf Pei Beis of first thing we saw the din of smelling. That if you smell the urba smells and you rispa, we went through that. And then the lashon of the Mishnah is chayla, if a person's sick, ma'achil noisay al pi b'kiyim. You feed the chayla on Yom Kippur through b'kiyim. Mashma, you need doctors. Let's be makbid lashon b'kiyim. Mashma more than one. Then ain't sham b'kiyim. If you don't have any b'kiyim, ma'achil noisay al pi atzmai. Then you'd feed him through his own ad sheyom died till he says enough. So we're going to discuss the first part of the shir. We're going to discuss this halacha about how many people does it take to go ahead, in fact, allow the choila to eat, depending upon what he says. So that's what we're doing. So we're going to start from Pei Gimel Amid Aleph. It's nice to see the Olam, my Chavusa. It's good to see him. So Pei Gimel Amid Aleph. Choila machino se'al pi b'kiyim. The second line from the top. Choila, you're going to feed through b'kiyim. Rabbi Yanai, choila oimet sorech. The choila says, listen, I have to eat. I have to eat. For Roifa yomer ain't it sorech. And the Roifa says he doesn't have to. Shoymim lechoila. We listen to the words of the choila. My taima. It says leiv yodeya moris nafshay. The person of leiv yodeya, the mind of a person knows the bitterness of his soul. In other words, he knows better than yenim. He knows better than what? Than the doctor. So it's Gemara Pshita. So I might think the Roife knows better. Kamash Malon. To that end, the opposite way, Roife Oimet Sorech, the Roife says you need, the Choyla Oimet Einet Sorech, and he says you don't need, so you would think you listen to him, because he's saying I don't need. Nonetheless, Shloimim L'Roife, the halacha is you go ahead and you listen to the Roife, you listen to the doctor, right? Now, I wanted to say that he knows better. My time up. Rashi says a shtus machbes choyav overcame him. I saw a Ran. The Ran says that since this is a din of suffik nefashis lahakol, the whole din is suffik nefashis. We're going to look for the biggest kula. So when it's him saying I need to eat and the other person saying I don't, we listen to him. When he says I don't have to eat, the din of suffik nefashis lahakol overrides what. The fact that we say he knows what's best for himself. Again, that's a list, at least in this first lashon. So again, nothing about doctors, a doctor, this is Rabbi Yanai, a doctor, and whichever is best for him, whether it's the Roifa, the single doctor, or him. Okay, now, what did our Mishnah say? Tanan, our Mishnah said, Chayla machil al pi b'kiyim. A chayla you feed through doctors, plural. B'kiyim in al pi atzmai loy, al pi b'kiyim in al pi baki echad loy. So the chayra fellas, both of Rabbi Yanai's din are incorrect. Both of Rabbi Yanai's din are incorrect. Why? Because it says b'kiyim, it's mashma two and not one roife. It's mashma that what you believe the roife and you don't believe him. So both dinim seem to be wrong. The first din where we're going to believe him over the roife. Secondly, the two dinim. Look at Rashi. Al pi b'kiyim trey al pi baki loy al pi atzmai loy. So al pi b'kiyim trey two. You need two. Al pi baki not, and al pi atzmai loy and not at all. So you have two kashas. Rabbi Yanai. And for the Gemara Hachamay Skin, what's our Mishnah speaking about? The Amma loy tzrichna. So our Mishnah, here's Pshat the Mishnah. If he says I don't want, and two doctors say he needs, then you feed him, right? If two doctors say, I don't want, he says, I don't want, and I'll be b'kiyim, okay. Fred Gemara, if you just, why do you need to b'kiyim? L'safulei al pi baki, go ahead and just have one doctor, right? According to Rabbi Yanai, guys, Rabbi Yanai said that one roife is believed. So like tzricha de'ika achrina b'hadei. There's another person, the amalei tzarech, right? Meaning you have aside from the person saying that I don't, you have another doctor agreeing with him. You have a doctor agreeing with him. So machin say al pi b'kiyim. So now you're going to go ahead and feed al pi b'kiyim. Pshita suffering the fashis lahakalu. The suffering the fashis lahakal says like tzricha de'ika trei achrina b'hadei. He has more. He says I don't have to eat. He's got two doctors who say I don't have to eat. So he's got three. On the other side, you have two doctors who say he has to eat. So it's 2 versus 3. So Kamash Malon, 2 versus 3 wins. Fred the Gemara, the numbers, when it comes to Eidos, the numbers don't make a difference. You have 100 Eidim saying one thing and 2 Eidim saying another thing. We don't go after the majority. We say it's equal. So what's the chiddush over here that you're believing the 2 over the 3? Hani midul inyan Eidos. That's only regarding Eidos. Aval inyan umdina basa deus as leinon, right? But linden umdina we go after deus. In other words, you go after the numbers. And usually, if umdina means an assessment. So if you have an assessment, we're going to go after the assessment of the ones that make more sense. If 3 people assess this and 2 people says this, so that's my money. So even though the umdina over here assessment is 3 says he doesn't have to eat and 2 says he has to eat, the suffix nefashis lahakol overrides the umdina. Fred the Gemara, 1 second. You're telling me Pshat in the Mishnah is the following. The Pshat in the Mishnah is speaking where he said, I don't have to eat. Good, that's what he said. The Mishnah says I don't have to eat. So go back to Pei Beis. Let's stick this Pshat in the Mishnah. Let's see Pshat in the Mishnah. And when he says, I don't have to eat, we feed him al yedei bekiyim, right? That's what you're learning right now in the Mishnah. When he says, I don't have to eat, that 2 doctors say he has to eat, we're going to feed him. Vim ain't sham bekiyim, and if there's no experts, then you feed him himself. But you told me he says, I don't want to eat, guys. Look at the flow of the Gemara. You're telling me the ukimta is, it's when he says, I don't want to eat. So when he says, I don't want to eat, and 2 doctors say he has to eat, you feed him. Flow along that line. However, if there's no 2 doctors, then he eats. But he's saying, I don't want to eat, right? It doesn't flow. Makes no sense. That's the Gemara's problem right now. Says the Gemara. Well, miditani seifa, 2 lines where it gets wide at the end. For miditani seifa, vim ain't sham bekiyim machilus al piatzmo, and if there's no bekiyim, you're going to feed him through himself. Michlal, we can infer the reisha the amar sarich. The reisha must be speaking where what? Where he says, I want to eat. Because again, clearly the seifa means you're feeding him. So therefore, we're back to the original question. How does Rabbi Yanai fit with the Mishnah? And if the Mishnah is missing words, here's the way you have to learn. When do we say that what? That the B'kiyim are believed, the Amar Leit Sorech, where he says, I don't want to eat. Then the B'kiyim are believed. Aval Amat Sorech Ani. If he says, I want to eat, Im Ein Sham B'kiyim Trey Elachad. There's not Bekiyim 2, only 1. The Amalite Sarech, you're going to feed him by himself. So here's where Rabbi Yanai learns Pshat, guys. If he says, I don't want to eat, and you have 2 Bekiyim say he has to eat, he eats. If he says, I want to eat, and you have 2 doctors saying you can't eat, he doesn't eat. If, however, you have him against the doctor, then he eats. That's the way Rabbi Yanai, that's what we're learning in Rabbi Yanai. So in other words, we're learning in Ukimta. If in fact there are 2 doctors connected his ratzon to eat, he doesn't eat. Now we're going to get to a different shita that despite no matter how many doctors, you're still going to eat. Says the Gemara, Ma Baravashi Amar, Kol Heichadam et Sorachani, wherever he says, I want to eat, no matter how many doctors you have against him. Afilu Ikameya, the Amri Loit Sorach, even if you have 100 that say you don't need, Lididei Shaminan, to him we listen. Shnemar Leiv Yodeya Maras Nafshay. Person knows himself best. So he argues on Rabbi Yanai. Mabar Ravashi says, if he says I have to eat, we don't listen to the doctors. Im Ein Sham Bekiyim, however, if there's no doctors, Machino Se'al Piatzmoi, Time with Leka Bekiyim, or Ika Bekiyim Loi. Says the Marhachi Kamar. B'medav Amurim Dam Leit Tzorech Ani. Amalamat Tzorech Ani Ein Sham Bekiyim Klal Machino Nesloi. If there's no Bekiyim at all connected him, we feed him. Al Piatzmoi Shnema Lev Yodei Maras Nafshay. So it comes out that again, if he says I want to eat, like Rav Yanai, it depends. If there are two against him, he doesn't eat. One against him, he does eat. According to Rav Ashi, if he says, I want to eat, then we're going to feed him. If he says, I don't have to eat, then what? If any doctor says that, then we don't, then if we have a keneged him, then we'd feed him. Says the Mishnah. Misha achsu bulmis. Bulmis is a disease, which says Rashi, Misha achsu bulmis. Choyle oiches machmas ravan. It's a choyle that takes place because of starvation and ain of chaos, and his eyes get dim. And he's in a state of sakana. And when his eyesight returns, be a duish in his rapper, you'll know he's better. So Misha achsu bulmis. You'd even feed him devarim tameim. If this is such a sakana, you're going to feed him mamish tarfus. You can feed him even an animal that's not kosher. At shiuru einav till his eyes lighten. Misha nashku kelev shaita, a second in. Someone who's bitten by a kelev shaita, and we'll see in the Gemara what a kelev shaita is. Ein machilin esay michatza kavet shalai. We don't feed him the chatza kavet. We don't feed him his liver. Rashi brings that there was an opinion that they would know the doctors to feed the liver of the dog. It's not complete. It's not enough of a reason to matter it. That's the Rashi. It's very famous machlokas here. The Rambam in Pirush Mishnayos says that the only time we believe a roife is only something that's b'derech tfi, that's b'derech teva, nature, something that works b'derech skuli, that works as skula. We don't go ahead Machala Shabbos for derech skula, and it seems to be if it does work, it's only working derech skula. It's not working derech tvi. Misha nafal of mapoilis le'aleinu. What someone at mapoilis le'aleinu, someone falls down a building or crashes on a person. Safek usham, safek enusham, safek chai, safek meis. Whether we're not sure if the person's there, or the person is not there. Whether we're not sure the person's living or dead. Whether or not safek huti, safek yisrael, whether it's a goy or a yid. You're going to clean away the debris to al safik nefashos. You find him alive. You continue to go ahead and dig him out. And if he's dead, you just leave him over there. How do you know a person is eyes? How do you know that he's able to? His eyes are whatever we call lit. When he's able to discern between good or bad, we're speaking by taste. He's able to taste between good or bad. That's when we know his eyes are good. Someone who's achse bulmis, you're going to go ahead and feed him what? You're going to feed him the least issa possible. We're saying over here that it seems to be that Shabbos is chutcha. Guys, very interesting lumdus over here. We spoke out many times. There's a concept of tumah chutra b'tzibur or tumah chutcha b'tzibur. When sometimes there's a waiver for something, and sometimes there is chutcha. So, for example, by the Korban Pesach, we said it's chutcha because again you have people going to the tumas meis when matchun and Pesach, the Pesach Rishon were only, and even when you bring a korban b'tumah, we said you can't eat it. The uniqueness of the Korban Pesach is you could eat it, but if a korban's brought, you don't go ahead and eat the korban. Then we have Tumah Hutra, for example, Shabbos, you bring a korban, it's mutter to bring in any which way. So over here, it apparently is that Tumah, that this halacha of Safik Nefashos, or the Nefashos is a din of Hutra, because if a person's in Sakana, but it's not even a suffix, in Vadai Sakana, but we don't go ahead and say, just feed him anything outright. We say we have to minimize the Isser as much as possible, because it says, if you have, we're going to give you different options and different levels of unshin. You always give the lower level. So, for example, tevel or nevela. You have a choice. You can give him tevel or nevela. Tevel, of course, is a chi of misa b'dei shamayim because it has truma mixed in. Nevela is a lav. So, what the halacha is, achil say nevela. You're going to feed nevela. Tevel u'shvius shmita year. After the zman beer, you're supposed to get rid of all the food. You're supposed to be mafker it. You go ahead. Shvius, it's a much lesser issa than tevel. Tevel and truma. Now here's an interesting shaila. Tevel and truma are both misa b'dei shemayim. Tevel, of course, is the truma mixed in before you tithed it, and truma is once you tithed it. Either way, which one takes precedence in terms of feeding the person that's sick? Says the Gemara Tanoihi, that's a machloikis Tanoim. The Tanya. Machilina say tevel, they machilina say truma. Don't shade up the truma, just go ahead and give him the tevel. Ben Tema, however, Ben Tema says Truma v'lay tevel. Go ahead, shade up the tevel, and give him what? The truma. Amar Rabba. Now, heichad the efshe b'chulin the kuliyam lei pligi the misaknin lei umasafin lei. Guys, it's Shabbos. You're not supposed to go ahead and shade up on Shabbos. We said separating Trumas and Mice and Shabbos is din of taking mana. You're like finishing something. You're completing something. So let's say the following. Let's say this guy needs a pound of food to eat, to live. So I have 2 pounds over here. So I shade it up. I'm going to have a pound of Truma, and I'm going to have a pound of Chulin. So even though I'm being over the Isser of the takana of not going ahead and shading up one from the other, you shade up and give him the Chulin. Let's say, however, you only have a half a pound of truma and a half a pound of chulin, right? And it's not going to do the job. So al karchuk, you're going to have to go ahead and come on to truma anyway. So it says the Gemara like this: Heicha the efshe b'chulin, you have a pound of each, and the pound's going to be enough. The kuliyam lei pligi the misakanin lei misafin lei. Keep pligi. When do they argue? With the lei efshe b'chulin. There's not enough food for chulin to go ahead and help this person survive. Masavar, one mandama holds tevel chomer. That tevel is more chomer, and therefore what? Don't go ahead and therefore shade up. That's bentema. Bentema says that therefore give him truma. Umasavar truma chamura. Don't shade up. Leave the truma in the tevel state. Masavar tevel chomer. Why? Avol truma chazi lekayin. Tevel is more chomer because no one can eat it. Even the kohen can eat tevel. Mashen came once it's truma, the kohen can eat it. So rather go ahead and shade up and feed the chayla truma rather than feed him tevel. Umasava no truma chamura. Aval tevel absolutely kune. Tevel you have it's a possibility exists to go ahead. Tevel the possibility exists to go ahead and be mitaking it by go ahead and taking it off. So even though at the end you're going to be left with chulin, and even though the chulin's not enough, but the bottom line is you took the shame of tevel off. Fred the Gemara. So you just told me in a Hechatimsa fellas where you where you shade up, let's say my scenario of a pound, and you can have enough. You have a pound and a pound, you're going to have enough food to go ahead and feed. You do it. What's the Chiddush? Efshe b'chulin pshita, efshe b'chulin pashit, go ahead and shade up. Like tzricha, b'Shabbos. We're speaking, it's on Shabbos. It says, b'Shabbos nami pshita, tiltalu darbanan. Who? It's only, tiltal over here is meaning the halacha of tikkun mana, of makav patish, is only drabanan. So achamayaskinon, here are we speaking about? We're speaking about otzes she'ein anakov. We're speaking about derabanan. We're speaking about a flower pot that does not have a hole in it. So the whole chiyuv what is derabanan. So the flower pot has a hole in it. The whole chiyuv is derabanan. Masava tevel chomer. Even tevel derabanan is more chomer. Therefore, you should go ahead and shade up. Umasava truma chamura. That truma is mochama. That's the case, and therefore, the chiddush is that even though it's only the rabbanon, you're able to go ahead and separate in a case where the chulin, you go ahead and do it. Even though you're doing an avodah, you're being over a rabbinical isser of separating truma, right? You're able to do it. The chiddush is that the chulin, that even though it's since the rabbanon, you're able to do it. It says let's say this is machlokes tanoim by the rabbanon the Tanya. A person is bitten by a snake. So this is their remedy. You can call a doctor even though he's outside the tchum. You can rip open a chicken. They would rip open a hen and take the blood and put it on the puncture wound of the fangs. And you can cut from the ground leek. You can feed them. You don't have to take it off. These are the words of Rabbi. Name of Rebbe Lazar of Shimon, he v'lei Rebbe. Let's say the machlokes where you have to take off not as like Lazar of Shimon, because like Rebbe, you don't have to separate it. I feel it Rebbe. I come like a Rebbe Hasan Melali and Maisa Yerik the Rabbanon. There's Maisa Yerik the Rabbanon. Rebbe was Mekel. Not that you don't have to take it off. Avol Maisa Dagan the Tevel the Raisa. Again, it says Tiroish Chavitz the Gancha Tiroish Chavitzarecha. The din of Truma is the rice is only Dagan, grain. Tiroish wine, Yitzarecha, and oil. So therefore, I would say maybe over there is Maida. I feel Rabbi Maida, the Shari Lei B'Atzah Shein Anakiv, Asi L'Mechel, that if you leave it in an Atzah Shein Anakiv, you may come to go ahead and make it from an Atzah Shehu Nakav. So therefore, Rabbi would say that you have to, even there, you'd have to shade up, you'd have to take off the Truma. Tarabanan, Michsha Achsa Bonus, someone who is gripped by boldness, you go ahead and you feed him something sweet. You feed him honey. And any other sweet thing. Dvash and any other sweet thing. Dvash and kol mini matika meirin. Ma'or eino. Dvash and any mini masika lightens up his eyes. Shalodam. That, in other words, this seems to go ahead and restore a person's. A person is feeling weak. Something that this sweet will ever go ahead and restore it. Even though I don't have a complete raya, zeichel dava. You have a zeichel dava. There was a Nachash Almoni attacks Kal Yisrael. Shaul goes to war. Shaul makes a shua. Anyone who eats, I don't know, anyone's can eat is he makes a shua that no one can eat. Yehonasan didn't hear the shua. He comes to a forest. He's very faint from fighting, and he sees a Yaris Davash. He sees honey. He goes ahead and puts a stick in the honey, and he said, and when he finds out what Shaul says, his reaction is Rona. Please see, ki oru einai, that my eyes lit up, meaning I was regenerated. Ki ta'amti ma'at devash hazeh, because I taste a little bit. So l'chor, you see a raya that devash can go ahead and restore your energy. Fred going, my afbishin raya l'dav, l'chor, it's a complete raya. What do you mean? It's only a remez. It's not a complete raya. So it's the hasam lav bolmis achse. Over there, he was hungry, but he wasn't suffering from bolmis. Over there, he wasn't suffering from bolmis. Amar Abaya. When does sweet help you? When does it regenerate? Only after achila. It causes a person to be hungrier. David and his men found an ish mitzri in the field. They brought him to David. David gave him lechem. He gave him water to drink. He gave him a cake of figs. And 2 raisins, which this so Tvela and Simukim are sweet things. The Yochal, and he ate, but Teshev Ruchai and his Ruchai was restored. So the Raya is the fact that David gave him lechem first. The fact that he gave him lechem first, you saw that the mini matika, the sweet things, only help after the etzem achila. Kilo lechem b'shas samayim shloisha yamim b'shloisha leilas. Amar Nachman, Amar Shmuel. Misha achsu bolnis. You give him a honey glazed ram tail, fatty ram tail in dvash. That seems to do the job. You even go ahead and give him soilus nakia dvash. Go ahead and give him some clean flour, none of that whole wheat stuff, and dvash and honey. Even barley flour in honey will do the job. Rav Yochanan says, one time I was grabbed by bulmis, and I ran to the east of the fig tree, and I took from that fruit. And I fulfilled in myself the pasan, Chachma goes ahead and lets the Baal live. Because again, what happens is the sun shines there, and that's the east side of the tree gets the most sun exposure, and as a result, the fruit is the sweetest. As a result of sun sweetened, right? You ever had sun sweetened raisins, or these are sun sweetened fruit? The Tanya Rabbi Yosef, I write to Litrin Tam Teina. If a person wants to taste really the best fruit, fig tree, Yifnul Mizracha, let him turn to the east side of the tree. Shnemar Umi Meget Fu Shemesh, as we say, Umi Meget Fu Shemesh, we say in Zoysa Bracha, and from the delicacies of the suns, the fruit. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Habi Kozli Baruch, a famous Maisa. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Habi Kozli, they're going on the way. Achse Bulmus, Rabbi Yehuda got Bulmus, Chabche Leroya, and Achle Lerifta. He went ahead. There was a roya there. He mamish took the roya's bread and ate it. Amalei Rabbi Yossi. So Rabbi Yossi said to him, "Kafachta es a roya. You went ahead. You took away from the roya's food, and which were you allowed to do because you were in sakana. However, kimat l'masar, they came to the city. Achse Bulmus Rabbi Yossi. Bulmus took hold of Rabbi Yossi. Adrua belogi l'tzaye. The people surrounded him. They wanted to give him different types of fruits and honeys and sweet things. Amalei Rabbi Yehuda. Ani kapakti as a roya. I went ahead and I took from the roya. I took kapakti as a kula, but you're taking care of the whole city. What do they say? What goes around comes around, goes around, comes around, something like that. Okay. V'su, Remeya, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, because they were famous story, Remeya and Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda, they were going on the way. Remeya have medayik b'shma. Before they would go ahead and ascertain whether this motel was a safe place to stay, Rabbi Meir had a means of doing that. He would go ahead and check into the person's name. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, they were not medayik in the name. When they came to a certain place, boy Yeshpiza, Yovle, Amrulei Mashmacha, they asked him, what's your name? So Amalahu, he told him, Kidor, my name is Kidor. So Amar said, Mayat himself, Shmamino Adam Rashahu. This guy, his name is Kidor, is a Rasha, Shneimar, because the pasuk says, Kidor tapuchos hema. Ki, because Dor, it's a generation of tapuchas. They're people who are ungrateful. They reverse things. They're not trustworthy. So he dashed it. The two words Kidor is Kidor. That's one name. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Ashlim Lekisayu, and they were staying there. They gave him to watch their kisim, their wallets. Rabbi Meir lo yashlim lekis. Rabbi Meir, it was not going to give him his wallet because he was medayik in his name. Instead, what did Rabbi Meir do? He went and he put his wallet on the father's grave, on Kidor's father's grave. That night, Kidor had a dream, and his father came to him in the dream, and Tashakal Kisa the Manach Aresha the Hugavra. He told him in the dream, take that wallet off my head. So then Kidor went ahead and told Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Meir about his dream. So Amalei, they told him, Chelme de Beishim Shalespu. It's Friday night dream, there's nothing to think about. Friday night dreams you don't have to worry about. Also, Reb Meir v'nitrei kula yuma v'aisei. Reb Meir went to the grave and he watched the whole day. He watched his wallet. L'macha amruloi havli kisan. The next day, they Reb Yossi and Reb Yehuda asked Kidor to give him back the wallet. Samalu lahayi devar miyolam, never happened. So Amalu Reb Meir, my loy that like Sisa Bishma. Why don't you medayik in the name? I told you this guy's not a trustworthy guy. So Amalei, my loy amad lanmai. Why don't you tell us? So Amalu Amri da Amri Anocha Shasha. When I said that, right, you should be careful, right? Achzuki mimari, you said, how can you be machzik, right? A person that in other words, you can't be machzik. The person is a Russian. So mashchu v'aylu l'chanus. They took Kidor. They brought him to a bar. And they got him a little drunk. Now, chazei tlovchei asvame. They saw that on his lips there was on his mustache there was lentils. There was red lentils. They went. They told his wife, "Listen, your husband told us to give us the wallets back." And they said, "How do you know?" I said, "Well, I'll give you a raya. He ate this breakfast. He ate lentils." So what happened? They went ahead. They took the kisim. They took their wallets and they left. He came home and he found out what his wife did. He killed the wife. So if you makbid, Mayim Rishonim will feed you basachazer, Mayim Achroinim Horguas and Nefesh. Here's the story. This guy, he didn't wipe his lips. That's why the Gemara there, this Gemara is born in Chulin. The Gemara says that one time, it was a time of Shmad, and the person was dressed like a goy, and he really was a yid. And he came to a certain place, and he didn't wash his hands. And as a result, the person thinking he was a goy went ahead and sold him basachazer. They sold the basachazer. The Maisa with that is the other guys, Mayim Achronim, you're supposed to do this and this and like this. The reason why Mayim Achronim, you go ahead and do this, is because to wipe away the lentils, because the whole Maisa happened. Maisa Achronim, if you're not marked with Maisa Achronim, you can kill someone. Well, the Soif Habidaike Bishman. In the end, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, they started taking Rabbi Meir's advice. They were Medaik in the names. Kimatal, who based the Shmei Bola, they came to a house of a guy's name was Bola. Like Ayla Lagabe, they didn't go inside. Amru Shmamino Russia, who they said this guy's a Russia. It says Oimar La Bola Neufim. I said that this one has become Bola, like it's become worn out because he was involved in Niyaf. He was so involved in Niyaf, it aged him before his time. So therefore there he never came over. That's therefore why it's Russia. Like Ayla Lagabe, Shmamino Russia, okay. I guess we could stop over here. Thank you for listening.
Shkoyach.
Rabbi.
Hit the bell.